Hello, welcome to the Gallimaufry, a podcast about history. Thank you for joining us once again. My name is Will, and I am joined today by my lovely assistant, Nick.
Thank you very much. It's rare that someone calls me lovely, but I'm happy that it's you. And isn't that also why I'm wearing this sequin outfit?
It is. We've got quite the show on.
And that's why you're waving your magic wand around.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. It's a good thing there's no video to this audio podcast, isn't it? So before Nick climbs into his box and I saw him in half.
Hey, what now?
Before we crack on with that, why don't we discuss what the topic of this podcast is going to be?
As you've probably all guessed from the previous clue, it was all about the wonderful, marvellous, fantastic, cheap, disastrous, polluting plastic.
Yes, life in plastic, it's fantastic, as they say.
Was that Barbie Girl? Was that Aqua?
That was Barbie Girl.
Oh, what a tune.
Lovely little 90s throwback there.
Do you know there's going to be a Barbie movie?
Is there?
I think it's already out. It may have. We release it quite a few months after we record it, so it's always difficult to be up on current events.
We do. Though we did, when we did the Mincemeat podcast, we did it so long ago that the Mincemeat film hadn't been announced. So it actually timed up really well. It was like we were preempting it.
Yeah, it was. I mean, yeah, it was perfect timing.
Obviously, we did a better job of it.
Of course, it was much more engaging. I mean, who likes Colin Firth?
Yeah,
no
we didn't have so much of a love triangle, a sort of love straight line.
Do you mean an ordinary relationship?
Yeah, I'd like to call them love straight lines. Things are better when you introduce geometry to them.
I've never used a compass or a protractor since school.
I've used a compass to open a parcel before. The point of it's quite good for getting through the packing tape. But compasses, they're made of metal, and we're not interested in metal today.
No, we're not. We're interested in plastics. So, from acetals to acrylics, Barbie girls to barbecues, Coke bottles to crimpoline. I mean, I could go on because all of these things are plastic, and they're all derived from strings of complex polymer chains, ingenious building blocks of wondrous and incredible materials. If there was one material to define an age, and one that kick-started a revolution in lifestyle, consumerism, and global trading, it's plastic. In fact, almost everything in your eye line will have some connection or relation, whether you know it or not. Even the clothes you're wearing, like that saucy spandex outfit you're sporting, Will.
Oh, thank you very much. It's very hard to get the sequins to stay attached to the spandex, but I appreciate the comment.
Yes, we both wear. If we are going to go ahead with this magician act, it's going to be very confusing for the audience if we're both wearing spandex sequence costumes.
I don't think it is that, because I get the hat and the wand, and you get the tiara. Everyone knows where we stand.
Well, yes, okay. if you insist, our show's coming to a theatre nowhere near you. Okay, but where does plastic all come from? How did it all begin? And is it as bad as that story you just heard? Like with all things, there's a lot of nuance, and it's as complex as one of the very polymer chains that we're going to talk about.
Yes, so good place to start. What is plastic? As Nick mentioned, plastics are a group of materials that can... That is not what you said. So plastics are...
Putting words in my mouth.
I
How
am.
dare you.
I wasn't listening, I just assumed.
Stop staring at the costumes.
So plastics are a group of materials that can be formed and moulded under heat and pressure. The word plastic actually comes from the Greek word plastikos, meaning capable of being shaped or moulded. And plasticity, in turn, refers to a material's deformability. The word itself has been around since the mid-17th century in common usage. Leo Baekeland, who created Bakelite, which we will be discussing later, was the first person attributed to use the term in relation to what we now know as plastic, and by the mid-20th century, everyone knew what it meant. Plastics are made from polymers, a substance made up of many molecules bonded together in long chains. These long chains grant plastics various useful properties, such as being lightweight, durable, flexible, and inexpensive to produce, which has led to their widespread use in the modern world. The word polymer actually also comes from the Greek. It comes from the words poly, meaning many, and meros, meaning parts. Though polymers themselves are not exclusive to plastic. A polymer can be either a natural or synthetic substance composed of very large molecules.
It sounds wonderful, doesn't it? Lightweight, durable, flexible, inexpensive. I mean, that is a Tinder profile tagline.
I'd go for it.
Yep, absolutely.
Especially that last quality.
mean, I'll let your partner know. I'm sure she'll be very happy to hear that. But essentially, almost anything is a polymer, really. The proteins that make up our muscles, our skin, even the sort of bits that hold together our DNA, you can sort of class them as polymers. So polymers are basically the building blocks of life, in a way. Although a scientist will probably come along and tell me, no, that's wrong. I mean, that's kind of right, but completely wrong.
That's generally our stance on things, isn't it? Kind of right, but also completely wrong.
Sprinkle a little truth in and everyone will believe it.
That should be our tagline.
Yeah. But quite frankly, there is no simple definition of plastic because you can literally create thousands and thousands of different polymer combinations to create many different types of plastic. I mean, we have a clear idea in our heads, and most people settle on the number 7 because there are 7 common recyclable forms of plastic. You know, that you got your acrylics, your polymethyls, your polycarbonates, your polyethylenes, your polypropylenes, your polyethylene terephthalate, otherwise known as PET, your polyvinyl chlorides, otherwise known as PVC, the sexy plastic, and your acrylonite butadiene styrenes, less sexy ABS.
Well, I don't know, butadiene styrene. I think I've been to that club.
So looking at it, things like your petrol and plastics all have the same structure, even candle wax. So gasoline has about 8 carbon atoms, candle wax 30, and plastic over 10,000. So we know who's winning there. Think of them basically like very long bicycle chains. And you can basically add a link to each one and you change its properties. Nearly all plastics that we use today are derived from fossil fuels. Boo, fossil fuels, bad. Originally oil, and then largely now gas. But plants, as in plants from the environment, like in your garden, they're increasingly playing a role too. Whatever this material they used in the end, whether it be plant-based, because you can actually take it from like trees, you can refine the sap of trees and turn them into something called naphtha oil, which is basically the same sort of substance you can refine from gas. It's just a very intensive process. But whatever this material they use, this is then treated with heat and pressure in a process called cracking. So if you've ever been past a big chemical plant, they're usually huge, sprawling complexes of pipes and big silvery towers, and the big silver towers are usually the crackers, which is where this process occurs. And they're incredibly energy intensive, because in order to basically get the raw product of ethylene gas, you kind of need to pour a lot of heat and pressure in. All environmentally friendly, from the sounds of it.
I could go for some cheese right now, though, all this talk of crackers.
A wrong type of cracker, but I like your enthusiasm. I wonder what the polymer chain for cheese is. Quite interesting.
It's a smelly polymer.
Once they've split the actual gas itself into its constituent parts, these materials are then combined into chemical chains, depending on what type of product you want to make. However, most forms of plastic, when created raw, come out as these kind of like little pellets or nubbins, which are like little white plastic beads. And these are the building blocks for every plastic material you could possibly imagine. And then companies take these beads and they turn them into, your PET bottles, your wrapping, anything you can think of.
So plastics are used across almost every sector, including consumer products, packaging, textiles, construction, electronics, automotive, industrial machinery, and even more personal devices.
Like mobiles.
Like mobiles, yeah.
Things that vibrate.
Yeah, that sort of thing. PlayStation controllers, mobiles. But plastic is such a huge industry that in the UK at least, more patents are filed for plastic products every year than any other material. It's estimated that over 10 billion tonnes of plastic have been produced as of September 2021, 6 billion of which are thought to be currently sitting in landfills or polluting the environment. In a study undertaken by the Environmental Investigation Agency, it was found that plastic production has increased by over 18,300% over the past 65 years. If global trends continue, it's estimated that global annual plastic production will reach over 1 billion tonnes by 2050.
It's a lot of plastic.
It's a lot of plastic.
That is literally life in plastic.
Is it fantastic?
We'll get to that a bit later.
We'll find out later. But this is a history podcast, so I think it's only appropriate that we delve into the history of plastic, because it's quite an interesting one. If we want to get pernickety about this, the first documented use of plastics by humans was in India around 1000 BCE, when we can find the first written evidence of shellac. Shellac is made from a compound secreted by a female lac bug, which is dried and dissolved in alcohol to make a natural polymer. So originally what was thought of as a plastic material was actually organic in nature. Animal horns, tortoise shell, amber and shellac are considered to be early natural plastics. So it's important to point out now the distinction between natural and synthetic plastics. So here's a fun carpet shop fact for you, Nick. I know you've been looking forward to it.
I think we all have.
From the time it replaced oil and wax finishes in the 19th century, shellac was actually one of the dominant wood finishes in the Western world.
We might need to redefine the parameters of fun.
You wait till we get to polypropylene carpets.
Oh, my God.
Ooh, twist or loop. Anyway, if you are incredibly old, or maybe a big fan of 1920s ragtime, you may recognise shellac as the material that old 78 RPM records were made out of, before eventually being replaced by the much trendier vinyl.
Would they have been quite brittle, shellac?
Yeah, they were famously quite brittle, and heavy as well.
Heavy and brittle is not a great combination.
Heavy and brittle, it's not. They also tended to wear out the needles very quickly. You'd get about one play out of a single needle.
I wonder, is that where the Beatles took their name from?
The Beatles, they spelt it wrongly, didn't they? The Beatles.
I know, but I'm just wondering the connection of old vinyl, not being vinyl, being shellac.
I couldn't tell you.
We probably should have done some some research for a podcast or other.
It could be that much like the female lac beetle secretes shellac, the famous pop band, the Beatles, secrete #1 hits.
I mean, if you're going to secrete anything, you might as well shit gold.
Yeah, it's probably much more profitable to secrete, Yellow Submarine than shellac.
Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. Definitely one that came out of a
they might
secretion session.
They might have been eating shellac when they came up with that one.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's shellac. And then there's rubber, which was first used by Mesoamerican societies to play what we call pocatok, a ball game where players used hips and elbows to knock a ball into a stone hoop that was perched sideways on the wall. So a game we often play in the basement to while away the hours.
It's basically, think of a basketball hoop, but you just turn it sideways.
Yeah.
And it's not a hoop, it's a stone hole.
Yeah, and obviously you need to have quite agile hips and elbows.
I mean, mine ache just thinking about having to even play that. It's just like...
It would be carnage.
It would be carnage.
Hips and elbows everywhere.
Maybe we should start doing like an OAP Pocatok tournament.
Maybe we could. We could talk about 78 RPM records as well.
If we worked in hip replacements, that would be something I'd definitely have to pursue.
Maybe we should be aiming this at an older crowd.
Exactly.
Yeah. But anyway, it was not until the 18th century that the first European French geographer, Charles-Marie de la Condamine, stumbled upon the rubber tree in the Amazon basin, bringing it to France and presenting it to the Academy of Science in 1736. It was, however, over 100 years later in the 1840s when American Charles Goodyear and then British entrepreneur Thomas Hancock took out patents on either side of the Atlantic for vulcanized rubber, treated with sulfur to make it more durable. Vulcanization made possible the rubber tyre for the bicycle and the motor car, whilst Tom Hancock then worked with Charles Mackintosh to make water-resistant clothing. It's funny, I thought he invented the personal computer.
So, really, you have the beginnings of plastic developing in the 19th century. But what really led to humanity's growing consumption for this new wonder material was a severe shortage of something so vital, so crucial to the well-being and sanity of every well-off Western citizen. They were running out of billiard balls.
Not billiard balls?
Billiard balls.
Billiard balls. I don't know how you could possibly cope without billiard balls.
It's unthinkable.
Here, I mean, it's very easy from our, comfortable basement in 2022 to talk about, we're abundance of billiard balls. Wherever you can see, the basement's full of the things, billiard balls everywhere. But to think there was a time when billiard balls could have been in short supply.
Yes, they were looking absolutely snookered.
Oh.
And bear in mind that there's going to be some terrible puns coming on. Right on cue, I might say.
Let's move on.
Let's chalk that one off. Billiard balls were produced from ivory, which was considered one of the natural plastics we were talking about. And simply put, there just weren't enough elephants in the world to ensure there was enough balls in the world. because one tusk only would produce 4 to 5. That's not even enough for half a game, let alone a full game. I mean, that's crazy. Alongside this, there weren't enough tortoises either to keep making the combs that people used to comb their hair whilst playing billiards. So, not only were they unable to play the game, they had unkempt hair. It was crazy.
Those poor people with their shaggy hair and their not enough balls for a full billiard game.
So in order to increase profits, I mean save these noble creatures, alternatives were sought. In fact, one enterprising American named Michael Phelan, often dubbed the father of American billiards, which is, a fantastic title to have, was particularly keen. And in 1863, he took out an ad offering roughly $10,000 for the invention of a substitute, which back then was equivalent to around about $200,000 to $300,000.
You could buy a lot of ivory for $200,000.
It wasn't enough ivory to go around, I'm afraid.
Oh.
Yeah. And also, please don't go out and buy ivory. It's an illegal trade. However, lo and behold, someone had actually already invented one. Well, sort of. Invented nearly 10 years earlier in that creative and cultural cesspit that we all know as Hackney Wick. It's that bit in between Victoria and Olympic Park in London, if you're not familiar with it. It's home to a lot of hipsters and artists.
Doesn't sound like our kind of crowd.
No. Though you are wearing a plaid shirt, so you might be able to fit in.
I'm wearing a plaid shirt. Hipsters don't tend to like magic acts, so...
Do you have any tattoos? Why are you having to check? Surely you would know.
No, I cut my leg the other day.
That's not a tattoo. That doesn't count.
It might scar up.
Anyway, its inventor was a man named Alexander Parkes, who was actually a brass worker who just happened to be an amateur chemist. Though his little brother Henry, also being a member of the Royal Society for Chemistry, may have also helped him in his endeavours. Either way, he created something called Parksine or Parksan, depends on how you pronounce it, in 1856, derived from cellulose. Now, cellulose is found in plants and trees. It's the substance that basically keeps the plant stiff.
Oh.
Yeah, so it's the Viagra of plants, but they produce it naturally. It's not the Viagra of plants. It's a really bad comparison.
Nick, cellulose is the Viagra of plants.
Speaking of stiff, he had 17 children by the end of his life.
It's all that cellulose.
He was an inventive fellow as well, outside of the bedroom, because by the end of his life, as well as having 17 kids, he had 88 patents to his name, or patents, depending on your pronunciation bent. We will probably switch between the two throughout the course of the podcast. Or rather me, because I would just forget how to pronounce it.
You go, okay, I know one of these is the American pronunciation and one of them is the British, but I don't know which is which. It's like schedule and schedule.
Calendar, I just say. What's in my calendar?
Diary.
Diaries are for teenage girls and 17th century poets.
I'll write about this tonight.
So Alexander clearly liked to keep busy. This would be classed as the sort of first commercial plastic, although it's not fully synthetic just yet. What he did was he took a load of cotton and wood fibres and then dissolved them in nitric and sulfuric acid mixed with vegetable oil to create what he called Parksine or Parksan. He even won a bronze medal in excellence for it at the International Exhibition in 1862, and we all know how much the Victorians love an exhibition. But despite his ingenuity, he was a frickin' terrible business person. He developed a company, named it after the product, and launched it in 1866 with a £100,000 investment, which at the time was an astronomical amount of money. But a little more than 2 years later, he had gone into liquidation. Probably busy in the bedroom, wasn't he? Anyway, part of this reason was the fact that the combs he produced wrinkled really quickly.
Oh, you don't want a wrinkly comb.
Exactly, yeah. And it's because he used cheap materials, because he wanted to keep the price down, which is kind of a noble aim, but he also wanted to sell quite a lot. And he didn't respect the length of the creative process to cure them.
He was the Alan Sugar of his time.
Basically, yeah. He produced an inferior product that no one really liked. But also made them difficult to sell was the fact that they were incredibly flammable.
It's not ideal, is it? So the tortoises weren't off the hook quite yet?
Not quite yet. However, in the end, his business partner, a man named Daniel Spill, developed something called xylonite in 1869. Which is basically the same thing, but sexier.
All the sexy things start with xylo.
Yeah. Xylophone?
I remember all the girls at school, they loved the xylophone player. That was you, wasn't it?
I was more of a recorder type.
Oh.
Yeah. The girls didn't like the recorders.
No, no. Should have done xylophone or glockenspiel.
He started his own company and made combs and mirrors, which were much more commercially successful because they were made properly. And he would send out salesmen to homes with catalogues to also hawk their goods, and it was a great success. Worse still, an American, in the same year, in 1869, managed to perfect and produce his own version of this new material and named it celluloid, which was slightly less egocentric than Parksine, because it was also named after the material it developed from. And his name was John Wesley Hyatt. He experimented with a bunch of different compositions after seeing the initial advert in the American paper, but ultimately only ended up creating mixtures that would produce sort of low-yield products like your dominoes and your chess pieces. Because the initial billiard balls he tried to produce just weren't up to scratch. They lacked the sort of smoothness and the bounce of billiard balls and the resilience, and they were highly volatile. In fact, when you collided two against each other, which you have to do while playing the game of billiards, they made a loud crack. In fact, there was one Colorado saloon keeper who wrote to Hyatt and said he didn't mind the sound, but every time the balls collided, every man in the room pulled a gun.
I think that would make snooker a lot more interesting if the balls were volatile and cracked when they collided.
Yes, but it might upset all the delicate ladies at the time, which was also a concern.
If you've seen a snooker audience, there are not delicate ladies in that audience.
Fair point.
Do you know, I'm thinking of the darts.
You're thinking of darts. I was about to say, isn't that more darts?
Another sport that could be improved with some volatility.
I would like to see them introduce a swinging dartboard.
Yeah,
I think that would really, really up the jeopardy.
That would be good, wouldn't it? They never. I'm surprised Bullseye never picked that up.
You know, we've still got time to create this new TV show. I mean, darts is as popular as it's ever been.
Well, a rethinking of Bullseye, but with a giant swinging board.
Yeah.
That explodes on impact.
Or maybe spinning as well.
Or if the contestant was spinning as well.
BBC, if you're listening. Or probably more like Channel 5. Anyway.
If Channel 5 would be, the contestant would be spinning and also in the nude, probably. Channel 4, they'd be spinning and telling you some interesting facts about Jane Austen or something.
It's starting to get a bit more ITV now, actually, isn't it?
It definitely. I think ITV is probably our place.
Yeah. Anyway.
Ooh.
Well, even if this composition didn't exactly produce the best billiard balls, it did also produce the dominoes and chess pieces, so at least the players had something to do whilst waiting and combing their hair. However, he kept at it and created a patent in 1870 for a new version made from mixing similar materials, nitrocellulose, camphor, alcohol, but then pressing them together in a heated mould. So this was the first instance where heat and pressure were used to sort of create this new mouldable plastic. And by the 1880s, they were selling sheetloads of the stuff, quite literally. And companies sprang
I get
up.
it.
Yeah, you get it.
Got it.
Get
I
it,
just got it. Okay.
There you go.
Very good. Continue.
He's been trying to work that one out since the planning meeting. And companies sprang up under the celluloid name, not directly related, but just using it because it was such a popular material. You know, there would be the celluloid piano key company, the celluloid brushes company, the celluloid cuffs, collars, combs, you name it.
So celluloid would go on to have a whole load of uses over the years, and not just for billiards players. It, as Nick said, it would find uses as a material for making ping pong balls, movie film, jewellery, buttons, hat pins, accordions, fountain pens, and even children's dolls. It was also incredibly flammable and liable to burst into flames at a moment's notice, which does bring into question why anybody thought it would be a good idea to make dolls from it. It later gained a quite notorious reputation after a number of cinemas burnt down. Who knew that putting highly combustible film near hot projector bulbs could ever go wrong? Still, at least the elephants could breathe a sigh of relief.
Not just the elephants, but also the tortoises and the beetles, at least for a while.
So you'll notice that with a lot of plastics that we consider to be quite modern, they were in fact discovered by mistake in the 19th century. However, not seeing any obvious use for these strange materials, the discoverers often failed to do anything with them before they were later rediscovered by later, more forward-thinking science types. One example is PVC. You may know it as the stuff that your pipes are made of, or your stretchy cat suit. PVC really is a wonder material, but it is actually slightly older than you may think it is. So in 1872, German chemist Eugene Baumann noticed that a solid white material had formed inside a container of vinyl chloride, which had been left on a dark shelf for several weeks. The material had actually already been discovered by accident in 1832 by a French chemist called Henri Victor Regnault.
You started so well with that French pronunciation and then it sort of just took a dive.
No, I just seeing Renault. However, Regnault failed to publish his findings until 1878.
Hang on. So he discovered it in 1832
Yeah,
and he then published them in 1870. He lived a fair old lick, didn't he?
he did. He was not the quickest of patenters, though.
Was he a tortoise?
May have been a tortoise. He was probably worried about someone turning him into a comb.
Yeah.
But anyway, the first patented process for actually manufacturing PVC was granted to German inventor Friedrich Klatter in 1913, and PVC has been in commercial production since 1933. The material now accounts for about 20% of all plastic manufactured worldwide, being used for a variety of applications such as pipes, packaging, medical equipment, containers, and even, if you can believe it, flooring.
Yeah, I can believe you're looking at me
stunned.
like I'm stunned. Yeah.
Stunned. PVC flooring. Who'd have thought it?
Everyone.
This episode may in fact be the closest I ever get to getting Nick to let me have a history of carpet episode.
It's not really carpet, is it?
Well, what you just wait. Polypropylene. Twist or loop? That's the question.
Moving on swiftly, it would take an early 20th century inventor from the wonderful country of Belgium to really kickstart the synthetic revolution. But initially, despite its widespread cheapness, it was actually quite an expensive process to begin with.
So this man's name was Leo Baekeland. He was born in the wonderful city of Ghent, and he was the son of a cobbler and a maid. But out of all the inventors so far, he was probably the only one to actually study chemistry. Sorry, Henry. He created Bakelite, the first real synthetic, mass-produced plastic. His early career was developing photographic development techniques, and in 1889, when he was 26, he travelled to New York on a fellowship to continue his study of chemistry. He was hired by a photographic house and created a highly successful paper called Velox in the 1890s that could be developed in gaslight rather than sunlight. In 1898, the Eastman Kodak Company reportedly purchased this for a reputed $750,000.
Not a shabby sum.
Not bad. Not bad. He could probably have retired then. Luckily, he didn't, though. Looking for a new challenge, and more importantly, a new source of revenue, he turned to plastics. When asked why, he answered that he had chosen it deliberately, looking for a way to make more moolah.
Yes, that's a paraphrase. That's not an actual, not an actual quote from him.
Moolah. His first objective was to find a replacement for shellac. If you remember from earlier, shellac is made from the secretions of the female lac bug.
Yes, you don't need to keep telling us that. It was literally only about 10 minutes ago.
I just like the word secretion.
You like saying it and doing it, I imagine.
But yes, shellac is made from the secretions of the female lac bug, which, while an absolutely charming concept, made it quite hard to mass produce. Typical female lac bugs, always too busy doing something else when they should be secreting shellac.
If only all secretions were as useful.
If only.
Yeah.
I should have a word with my nephew. He secretes some very unuseful materials.
Mine too.
Yeah.
Let's find a way to monetize our relatives.
I'd be like, take a note from the female lac bug. Secrete shellac.
Chemistry and the development of polymers was becoming a budding science. The study of natural resins, and particularly natural materials, like your ivories and your shellacs, showed up a similar structure. Scientists have finally started to understand the polymer chains that make up life. Woo! And like Baekeland, tried to replicate this with chemicals. Because, chemicals good. Woo! Mm. In his case, phenol and formaldehyde, both wonderful chemicals, as we all know. He first tried to produce a soluble phenol formaldehyde shellac called Novalac, which sadly never became a market success. So not everything turned to plastic in his hands.
No, he did have that 750 grand though.
It's
not all bad.
US dollars.
Oh.
Yeah. He then accidentally stumbled, as with all of these things, it's all about trial and error, isn't it? Stumbled onto his biggest success to date while searching for a binder for asbestos. Now, asbestos, as we all know, is a bad thing. And just to clear up, is not a type of plastic, as I thought, quite wrongly, is actually a naturally occurring mineral, which is quite deadly, as we all know.
Yes, it's a bit nasty. We could do the history of asbestos, but it would be an incredibly depressing episode.
But I'd rather do that than the history of flooring.
Harsh words.
Harsh words, but true. Using the same materials, but playing with heat and pressure, He created a hard but mouldable plastic.
The material was produced by heating phenol, a substance...
Phenol.
Ah, the material...
Phenol.
Phenol. I was just thinking of sausages again.
But why?
Phenol.
It's a vegetable. Why would you think of sausages?
Phenol, it goes really nicely in sausages. The material was produced by heating phenol, a substance extracted from coal tar, and formaldehyde, that stuff they use to preserve dead bodies. It may not sound too appealing on paper, but it did have the huge advantage of being neither explosive nor a substance extruded from a bug's arsehole. And for that, I think we can all appreciate the work done by Bakerland.
I thought you were a big fan of secretion.
I'm all about formaldehyde now, far more exciting.
Brilliant. Coincidentally, over in Scotland, another inventor named James Swinburne was also working on a similar process, but Bakerland beat him to the patent office by 1 day. That's so annoying. The first plastic boom, though, was about to begin, and the material that Bakerland had created had a distinct style to begin with. It was dark brown, looked a bit like wood, but not really wood, and could easily be mass-produced, making it ideal for burgeoning new design trends that were sweeping across the post-war world. In fact, some products became 20th century icons. The Perma camera, the Echo AD36 radio, and who can forget the trusty telephone that we all know from 1920s and 30s movies.
Telephone, what's that?
Just a telephone, the sort of classic U-shaped design with the...
U-shaped. How many megapixels did it have?
None. But it had a cord.
It had a cord. Did the cord have 5G?
It had more than 5 knots in it.
Did it run Spotify?
No.
I'm not impressed.
We all know what it takes to impress you, and it's secretion, or formaldehyde in this case. By the late 1920s, chemists in Germany had perfected adding colour into the process, and then suddenly, you didn't have to have a dark brown, woodish-like material. You could have red, yellow, green, and just classic black. Bakerland, however, he carried on with his company until about the year 1939, when he decided he wanted to go sail his yacht around the world. I mean, what a year to pick.
Yeah.
And he sold his company to what we now know as the mother of all chemical companies, Dow. But actually, Dow itself didn't actually start producing plastics till much later. They originally started selling bleach and bromide. Sexy stuff.
Cleaning products and medical supplies.
But they expanded into the growing business of plastics in the 20s and 30s. Funnily enough, some historians suggest this was because they paired up with massive oil and gas producers like Exxon, who were trying to figure out a way to profit off the waste gases of the extraction process, specifically ethylene gas, which you get from when you sort of extract oil and gas and you refine it into the gasolines and the crude oils that you need, etc. In a funny way that history does, a lot of plastic companies are now actually trying to figure out how to process their waste gases into something profitable, particularly hydrogen. Because when you refine gas in that cracking process that we talked about, you get a lot of excess hydrogen, which we call blue hydrogen, because it's produced from fossil fuels. And now a lot of companies are seeing hydrogen as a potential fuel of the future, because it's clean burning.
Yeah, my gas man, I have a gas man. When he came round, he was telling me that the next generation of boilers, they're actually looking at mixing hydrogen into the gas supply.
We should really say the term gas person.
Gas individual.
That's better.
My gas engineer.
A GI. No, that's wrong. No, we shouldn't use that expression. But anyway, coming back to the past rather than back to the future, we started in England and we're going back to brilliant Blighty, specifically to the birth of ICI, otherwise known as Imperial Chemical Industries, once the crowning jewel in British industry. Formed in 1926 from a group of different British chemicals companies, it will go on to dominate the plastic industry, starting with the development of Perspex in 1932, but hitting the mother lode with polyethylene only a year later. Formed in a serendipitous experiment to try and create something else. As with all things, they discover them by accident.
It's a bit like Bake Off, isn't it? Sometimes it goes wrong and you come up with something amazing. And sometimes Paul Hollywood just gives you a disappointed look.
That would be correct if Bake Off they was cooking and suddenly they developed a new form of cake.
Oh, they haven't done that before.
Okay.
Normally it's just a new shape of cake.
They were attempting to combine ethylene and benzaldehyde under great pressure and heat, as they discovered works quite well to create plastic, when some oxygen leaked in and produced a white waxy substance. This proved to be the most wonderful, or disastrous from your viewpoint, fuck-up in history, because it's now the most common plastic on the planet. And although, strictly speaking, it was actually first discovered by a German chemist named Hans von Pechmann, who prepared it by accident as well in 1898. He didn't think much of it, apparently, but ICI did, and they saw the potential in commercialising it. Its first application was actually insulating radar cabling during the Second World War, but consumer products soon followed. But really, it was the development by another huge chemical company in the early 1950s, specifically Phillips Petroleum Company, who developed an economical process and managed to reinforce polyethylene into high-density polyethylene, HDPE. Now, we know HDPE because it's one of the 7 plastics on that list we quoted earlier. It's used to make a range of things like pipes, as well as PVC can make pipes, HDPE can make
Gimp
pipes.
suits?
Not gimp suits, but also your sort of cleaning bottles, your like bleaches and stuff. They're usually HDPE bottles. Also, toys and a multitude of other things. Plastic, you can make basically anything out of plastic if you want to, just because it's such an easily moldable and durable material. ICI's other rivals, namely Dow and DuPont, had a series of plastic successes as well. DuPont in particular had a massive hit with nylon and Teflon. The latter we all know from the fantastic film Dark Waters for less than positive reasons.
So anybody who's had a quick rummage around Nick's wardrobe could tell you that nylon is a genuine game changer for the fashionable man or woman about town. Speaking of which, this brilliant product would later be blended with the equally vogue spandex to make those stretchy cycling shorts we're all so fond of.
How did you get in my wardrobe?
You keep leaving the door open.
How did you get in my house?
You keep leaving the door open.
When you say leaving the door open, do you mean locking it tightly?
All joking aside, however, nylon is genuinely pretty incredible stuff. The material was originally developed by Wallace Carovers at DuPont in 1935, however didn't become available to the public until 1940. Initially, nylon was marketed as a material for tights, which had traditionally been made from much more expensive silk. In its first year of production, nylon stockings, or tights, earned DuPont the equivalent of $150 million. When America entered World War II, DuPont shifted its entire nylon production to supporting the war effort, producing items such as parachutes and mosquito nets. When production was eventually shifted back to tights after the war, demand was so high that up to 40,000 consumers were reported to have queued up outside a department store in Pittsburgh just to buy a pair. It's like the iPhone of its day. And DuPont was really on a roll in the 1930s, first with nylon and then with a little chemical called polytetrafluoroethylene, otherwise known as PTFE or Teflon under its brand name.
Well done.
Thank you. PTFE is part of a group of chemicals known as fluorocarbons, substances consisting only of fluoride and carbon molecules. Fluorocarbons are known for their incredible stability under high heat due to the strong bonds between the fluoride and carbon atoms, as well as being insoluble in water. These properties, along with being naturally non-stick, led to PTFE being the ideal coating for non-stick pans. It's not just lovers of fried eggs that should be grateful, though. PTFE is actually one of the most non-stick materials we know of, leading to it also being used in lubricants, machinery, and even spacecraft. Quite why a spacecraft needs to be non-stick, I'm not sure.
And we all love a non-stick pan. We won't really go into the whole Teflon saga, but yeah, as I said, I recommend watching the movie Dark Waters because it's a fascinating film. Dow, on the other hand, had successes with polystyrene and synthetic rubber. And coming back to ICI, despite its initial breakthroughs and the development of Dulux paint, ICI, like all British companies, seemed to run aground after a while and was sold, at least for a tidy sum of £8 billion in 2007 to Dutch rivals Asco Nobel. So as Will mentioned, a lot of plastic production was geared towards the war effort in World War II, which prompted a post-consumer boom afterwards, because suddenly all these companies were making loads of plastic products and had a huge surplus. So what do? You turn them into new products to sell to the everyday person. Success and money, and you don't have to worry about anything. Everything and anything they could think of could become plastic, which led to some things like the Tupperware boom. L. Tupper's machine-moulded form, dubbed the Poly-T and was seen as the material of the future, initially actually failed to sell because it was such a simple utilitarian device. It didn't really lack any of the sort of imagination and colour we know that Tupperware has today.
Not very sexy, is it? A box
No.
to keep your sandwiches in.
However, this all changed thanks to a woman named Brownie Wise, who used the door-to-door saleswoman technique and created the infamous Tupperware party. which was actually just selling Tupperware. I thought it actually meant something else, but okay. That was just my mind racing to other places.
Did you think it involved car keys?
No, that I know what that is. That's a swingers party, right?
Is it?
Yeah. Oh.
Oh.
Have you just been stealing people's cars?
I just thought we were swapping cars.
And the Tupperware party was a huge success in basically allowing a sort of this weird mix of consumerism and cultural relatability to mix sort of together. She recognized that the product's success was its ability to sort of drive social networks within people. So even if you didn't necessarily want the Tupperware, you wanted the association of hanging out with other women. And so it actually was kind of this cultural opener. You had women from different social echelons sometimes mixing because they were hosting parties, even different racial identity groups as well. So it's actually kind of a breakthrough in that respect. And also Brownie was the first woman to appear on the front cover of Business Week in 1956. Aside from Tupperware, there were a multitude of other uses for plastic. By the 1950s, homes made entirely of plastic, from the surfaces to the floors to even the appliances and the walls themselves, were being made and touted. However, some of these products took off, some of them didn't, because having plastic walls isn't necessarily as nice as having a nice brick or wood one. But, everything and anything, as we mentioned, like milk bottles we know today come in plastic milk bottles. Originally they were glass. However, the first use of plastic containers of milk were not actually bottles, but little bags that milkmen used to chuck at doors. Which you can see the problem there when you chuck a plastic bag.
I can see the problem. Something about a bag of liquid just feels wrong to me.
That was also the thing. It felt weird to sort of feel the liquid moving around in the bag. So they didn't take off initially. But however, some people have suggested bringing those back because they're smaller and more compact than plastic milk bottles. And funny enough, some of the products we mainly associate with being plastic today didn't actually come along to the sort of 60s and 70s. So the plastic bag, the humble plastic bag, the thing we vilify the most out of any plastic product, it didn't actually get introduced until the 60s. So there was a Swedish company called Cellaplast who didn't actually originally create the plastic bag in the way we thought. They created like this sort of tube-like holder. And then one day another scientist in the organization looked at it and went, maybe we could seal the tube and like give it some handles. And then eventually by 1965, they developed what we call the T-shirt plastic bag, which is that familiar shape. Cellaplast filed for a patent in 1965 for this T-shirt plastic bag, but they weren't introduced until 1979 in America, where shops like Kroger and Safeway had picked them up. But relatively few stores saw the value in using them. People just preferred paper. Plastic was way cheaper, though, and the supermarkets really wanted to push it, as did the companies making them. By 1995, though, plastic dominated 80% of our shopping bags. So it's a relatively late newcomer, yet it's something we always associate with plastic. Then, of course, there's the humble plastic bottle, made, of course, of polyethylene terephthalate, or PET. It's probably one of the most common forms of plastic that we all recognise because it's one we all use on a daily basis. In fact, I've got one right here, which is a bottle.
You monster.
I am a monster. PET was created in 1941 and was originally sold as wrapping. So, the sort of stuff you get around food packaging. Oh, like this. Oh, live action.
Oh, you're digging a hole for yourself there.
Oh, it's actually just static.
We bought some more microphones from Terry.
Welcome to GCSE Bite Size. So it was initially sold as wrapping, and it wouldn't actually become a bottle until 1971. Incredible, isn't it? When Nathaniel C. Wyeth, another American scientist, clearly tired of glass bottles because he just kept dropping them and they were smashing, and also because he was paid a bunch by the companies to come up with an alternative. Plastic, because of its permeability, it lets a little air in and out, just the nature of the material, was perfect for a carbonated bottle. And so another massive icon was born. Almost every soda bottle on the planet today is made out of PET. You
ever find it strange that fizzy drink bottles moved from glass to plastic, but beer bottles never did?
It's because of the permeability issue.
Is it?
Yeah. So plastic is too permeable to store alcohol in a proper way, so they need to be stored in glass.
Oh, okay.
By the time the bottle had arrived, plastic's honeymoon period was coming to an end. People had started to raise concerns over plastic pollution as early as 1960. It was losing its reputation as a wonder material and fast becoming associated with being cheap and tacky. Funny enough, we've now come full circle to where we started. Rather than looking at chemical solutions, we're turning back to the natural environment.
I think I know what you're saying. We should round up some elephants We should get rid of plastic, go back to elephants and tortoises.
Somewhere there's a Greenpeace member going, "Ah!"
Well, I hate plastic, but I also hate the ivory trade.
I think you're absolutely right. Let's round up the elephants.
Yeah.
I mean, they're already dying out anyway.
What do they do for us?
Yeah, exactly. Just look nice on wildlife documentaries. That's all they do.
Yeah.
If only pandas could be made into plastic.
If only, that'd be perfect, wouldn't
Yeah.
it? Perfect solution for them.
Waste of space of pandas. I
Never
hate
get,
pandas.
never get a panda skin rug, do you?
We should start a business.
Yeah.
No, funny enough, we're not going to go around slaughtering elephants and tortoises again.
Yeah, the pandas, we're not committing either way with.
I'm a bit worried about your sister's tortoises now, actually thinking about it. I should warn her that you're coming. Yes, we've started developing natural green plastics, similar to, obviously, the cellulose plastics that we originally started with, but these are derived from cornstarch, for instance. In fact, ICI, before they dissolved in 2007, developed the first practical biodegradable plastic called Biopol, which was first used in a Wella shampoo bottle. Wonder what happened to that. I'm not sure you'd want a biodegradable shower bottle. You just come home and you goop everywhere.
Yeah, I don't know. Weller is still around.
Yeah.
Is it your brand of choice? Weller.
It's my brand of hairspray.
Weller, as used by Nick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm open to collaborations and sponsorship.
Yeah, I'm a fan of CN by Lidl.
Which brings us on to plastic today, really. It's a bit of a problem.
Arguably, plastic is a victim of its own success. It's lightweight, it's durable, it's cheap, precisely the qualities that make it so bad for the environment. However, to be fair, all things break down. Wood, metal, people. Just look at asbestos.
Breaking down right now.
I can see it. It's been a long day. Just look at asbestos, which is surprisingly a naturally occurring element and incredibly deadly to humans. However, the extent of how damaging microplastics might be is still an emerging science. But generally, it's probably not a good thing. But the biggest enemy is people. We just don't really want to spend the money recycling plastic. We also litter like crazy. Plastic itself has been responsible for many scientific, medical and consumer breakthroughs. We wouldn't be sitting here without it. It's a bit of a double-edged blade, really.
I think that's it. It's the combination of there's a lot of medical and health risks that we think are associated with plastic, but we don't really know. We don't know how much it's carcinogenic or certain types of carcinogenic because we are all living longer. And plastic has enriched our lives in many different ways. But the energy cost of, say, recycling glass is a lot higher than recycling plastic. And the use of a plastic bag, one reusable plastic bag, is much more energy and environmentally efficient than, say, a cotton bag. Because a cotton tote bag, creating cotton tote bags is incredibly energy intensive. And people don't think about that when they think about the whole scale of things. They don't think about the energy cost of creating something and the reuse factor as well of it. Because you may create something that you can reuse over your lifetime, but the actual initial cost of creating that might be far outweigh the actual amount of times you use it.
It's the old sort of electric car argument, isn't it?
Yeah.
They may... Driving around in your electric car may produce no emissions, but the materials and the energy that's required to create that electric car and the huge batteries that go inside it, I mean, there's a lot to offset over the lifetime of that car.
It's exactly it. And by the way, we're not advocating that everyone goes around just using plastic all the time and driving their gas-guzzling cars, because that's not what we're advocating.
No.
But it's we got to think about things. We can't just switch out something and expect it to be an instant success, because everything has its cost. If we started using paper bags all the time, think about how many trees we'd need. If we started using glass bottles, think about how much glass we need, how much energy that would need to take. Everything in our society is built around plastic because of the consumerism companies that have encouraged it over the decades, but a lot of things wouldn't be possible without plastic because it is such an easy-to-make, lightweight material. And that's also a problem because it lasts and it's durable, and because people are lazy and they chuck it away into the environment and then complain, oh, that turtle's now strangling in a six-pack beer can plastic container, whatever it is, because some idiot has tossed that out.
It's a people problem as much as it is a plastic problem.
It is. It's a combination. So we need better ways of recycling, and there are currently sort of three main ways we recycle. So the first one is mechanical recycling, which is your bog standard plastic recycling, where you put a bottle into a bank or whatever. That gets sent to a factory. It gets sorted by colour and plastic type. It then gets ground down into the sort of plastic chips, which then get washed and processed and then mesh back into pellets, which can then be used to create recycled material. So a lot of bottles end up becoming things like shampoo bottles. Like Dove do a lot of reusable shampoo bottles because when they get recycled, they end up coming out as this sort of grey colour. So a lot of companies don't like using recycled material because it comes out in a certain type of colour. And there's also a lot of hygiene regulations that plastic manufacturers have to follow. So some plastics you just can't reuse in food. And because plastic is quite permeable, it absorbs some of the qualities of things. You have to really clean it and really break it down, which is expensive. Then you have energy recycling, which is basically just burning plastic to create energy, which creates emissions as well. Mm-hmm. But there are improving techniques are trying to reduce the number of CO2 emissions from burning plastic. But it gets rid of landfill and it solves an energy problem down the line. And then, of course, there's chemical recycling, which is actually known as advanced recycling, which is a nicer way of saying chemical recycling because no one likes chemicals.
No.
It just sounds nasty. And it's essentially taking plastic and breaking it down to its constituent parts again. So basically separating out everything and then reforming it into brand new plastic.
So can we use it? We mentioned earlier about hydrogen being a byproduct of plastic manufacture. Can that blue hydrogen be used for chemical recycling of it as well?
I'd imagine so, yeah. But it's also when you think about it, hydrogen, it's quite a volatile substance. But and everyone thinks of obviously like the big Zeppelin explosions and things like that when they think of hydrogen as a fuel. But you can buy hydrogen cars now today. There are about 12 filling stations in the UK, I think, of hydrogen for hydrogen vehicles. So it's not a particularly convenient journey for you if you happen to live in the middle of nowhere and you have to go all the way to Manchester to fill in your car or London. So it lacks the infrastructure. But hydrogen is a very clean burning fuel. It's silent as well. I've driven in a hydrogen car and it's almost like driving a futuristic spaceship. They kind of have to add a sound because it's just quiet.
It's tech that's been around for a while. I remember as a kid watching Tomorrow's World or something and seeing the hydrogen car, and they said you put hydrogen in it and all that comes out is water. Yeah. That's where cars need to go, and that must have been 20 years ago now.
But coming back to plastic is one of those massive subjects. The other big thing about plastic is it's made from fossil fuels. It's made from oil and gas, and that is the other big no-no. A lot of plastic companies are now trying to stop producing new plastic, and they're really focusing on recycling. In fact, they've pushed the whole recycling issue because they've had to, because of public backlash, but also because it's also just good business sense. If you can make a product and then get it back for basically free, and then make the same product again, you're a quid's in. And that's called the circular economy. There are beneficial elements to using plastic. We don't know the health effects of it, but from where it's come from, plastic has really shaped the world as it is today. It's really driven our society as we know it, for better or for worse. Think about COVID. Think about how many tests. Think about how much plastic's used in making all those tests, for better or for worse again.
Are you saying they should have used Bakelite for those COVID tests?
Flammable COVID tests.
Maybe that's the answer. Make it all of celluloid and then it just catch fire. It'll explode. It will deal with itself.
Yeah, exactly. Releasing all that lovely CO2. So plastic is a huge, humongous, scary topic. And we are not passing comment on whether we should keep using plastic or just get rid of it. But we just wanted to present plastic is not, it's not a black and white issue. It's a complicated issue. Like with all things, it's got a really interesting history and development. Yes, there are better ways to create plastic. The way plastic has developed is become incredibly cheap and nasty, like its name, because it's such an easy material to produce. And that's just people monetizing it and taking advantage. So a lot of the horrible microwavable black plastic stuff, you can make that a better way. Because right now it's very difficult to recycle that. But again, it all comes down to money. People just want to make money.
That's it, isn't it? That's the society we live in.
TLDR, as they say. Will, plastic? Opinion?
Plastic. Useful, but consequences.
There you go. That's the entire podcast.
Greenpeace can shut down now. I've sorted it out. No, it's one of those things, isn't it? We wouldn't be where we are without it, but it's also something that comes with its own issues that we as a society need to be prepared to deal with. and maybe throwing your McDonald's wrappers outside the window on the side of the A3 isn't the right way of going about it.
No, okay. And perhaps we're being a little harsh on people as well, because companies and recycling companies need to pull their finger out as well. They need to get with the times and figure out better ways to recycle things, and better ways to reuse products, because we can't keep carrying on as we are.
No.
And that's plastic.
Was it fantastic?
It was all right.
It's all right.
Yeah.
There we go. It was all right. So, on that note, have you, during your research for this episode, Nick, did you find anything particularly interesting or anything that you think is worth mentioning at this point?
Funny enough, one of the interesting things I found, which was from a really fascinating article by Scientific American, there's a great twist of irony around the success of celluloid, because celluloid film almost killed the industry that spawned it in celluloid combing. So the celluloid comb industry came first and then celluloid film. But when they released images in 1914 of Irene Castle, a ballroom dancer to a movie star, she decided to cut her long hair into a short bob, prompting female fans across the world to cut their own hair, which meant they didn't need combs. So celluloid film actually put the celluloid comb industry into a massive recession. And there's a place in Massachusetts called Leominster, which had been the comb capital.
Oh.
And devoted to combs, basically. And nearly overnight, half of the companies shut down. Thousands were left out of work, all because some lady decided to cut her hair and it was broadcast on film.
Oh, wow.
One of the owners, called Sam Foster, he told his workers not to worry, we'll make something else, and ended up hitting on the idea of sunglasses.
I bet the tortoises wish she'd had her hair cut a few decades earlier.
Maybe.
Film killed the comb. It's not quite as catchy for a song title, is it?
Anyway, what's your interesting tidbit?
So I was looking at plastics and how they've been used over the years, and one of the things I came up with was the Trabant from East Germany. Are you familiar with this?
I'm intrigued.
So the Trabant is a series of small cars produced from 1957 until 1991 by the former East German car manufacturer VEB Sachsenring Automobilwerke Zwickau.
Really working that GCSE German. You've got that.
It's tough, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'll get them in the end. Initially designed as an affordable car for East German citizens cut off from the West, the Trabant was unimpressive to say the least. It had no tachometer, no indicators, no seatbelts, and an engine better suited to a lawnmower with a top speed of about 60 miles per hour that smoked like an Iraqi oil fire. That is a quote from a journalist. One of the novel features of the Trabant, however, was that its body was made of a special kind of plastic known as Duraplast. Duraplast was a composite thermosetting plastic similar to fiberglass. However, unlike fiberglass, which, to be fair, had its own joke of a car to be embarrassed of in the shape of the Reliant Robin, Duraplast was made from old rags and resin. Often considered one of the worst cars of all time, the Trabant has become something of an icon, both within the former East Germany and throughout the world. And Duraplast is still in production today, however, it's mostly in the form of toilet seats. And Duraplast was not a particularly good material. It used to just disintegrate when you crashed it.
Does that happen to the toilet seats as well?
If you could drive a toilet seat at 60 miles an hour, it would probably disintegrate as well.
What if you landed on a toilet seat at 60 miles? I suppose you go through the floor.
Be uncomfortable, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
60 miles an hour.
We started with a low bar, and we're now in the toilet.
I think we gave plastic its fair due.
Well, it's been a pleasure, as always, to be your lovely assistant.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure to have you. Now, if you could just climb inside the box, I'll spin it around a few times, and then I'll get the saw out.
Right. Who's going to do
Have you got your nylon tights on?
I have, but I'm just
Good.
more worried about the next episode of surviving.
Well, the top half of you will do it, won't it? You don't need the legs.
Anyway, on that delightful note, that's it.
That's it. That's our show. Yeah. Thanks for listening. As always, please do subscribe and listen to us. We're in all the usual places. Spotify, Apple Music. You can also visit us at thegallimaufry.show and read all of our write-ups, find our sources.
And with that, we'll leave you with a little taster of what's to come in the next episode.